Welcome. We are live on air with this week's edition of Drupal Chat. I am Mark Isaacson, and I'm your host. You can find me on Drupal.org at Vegan Triathlete, and we are approaching my 7th year Drupalversary. And it was actually kind of funny when I looked at my profile the other day. The way they showed my membership, they said I've been a member for 6 years and 12 months. So interesting way to count things. I'm not sure why that didn't end up saying 7 years. I'm sure it was a matter of that it's probably not quite exactly a year, and it was just rounding it up to call it 12 months instead of whatever it would have been, 11 months and however many days. But that was kind of a funny thing for me to see on my profile there. I guess maybe a little bit of mathematical humor. So today I'm going to be talking about figuring out how to use a module. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about figuring out how to use a contributed module, because actually it can be a bit easier to figure out how to do that than to figure out how to use some of the core modules, interestingly enough. Although you may find other resources when you're looking to learn how to use core. So I came up with the idea for this chat because just recently on a project that I was working on for a client, I was using the field collections module, or field collection, I should say, module. And I needed to do a bit of custom work. And so I thought this would be useful for people to hear about how I figured out how to do what I wanted to do. But I'm going to take it from the beginning for everybody, because again, I'm not going to assume that everybody's interested in learning how to code to interact with the module. Sometimes people just want to know how to use the module, period, when they install it on the site or what the module does for them. So the first place that you're going to want to start when you're looking to learn how to use a module is to visit the module's project page. And different module maintainers will provide, varying amounts of documentation right on the project page to give you an idea of how things work. And sometimes what you'll find on the project page as well is that they will provide a link to like a video that somebody's done online that walked through using the module. So sometimes right off the project page, you'll get to a tutorial that you can take online, and you can just check out the tutorial, and that may explain everything that you need to know. Now, that's not the case for every contributed module. Certainly also not the case for every Drupal core module that's out there. And with Drupal core, looking at the Drupal project page, it certainly doesn't go into any significant amount of detail, almost no detail at all, about the individual submodules that are part of the Drupal core. So the next place that you can go to start learning about how to use the module is the module's configuration page. When you enable a module on your site, then you will generally see a new link that will appear next to the module on the modules listing page to get to the configuration page. That's not always the case. Sometimes the module maintainers haven't put the necessary information to tell Drupal where to find that configuration page, at least to tell Drupal, give it the hint about putting it on the modules page. So sometimes you will actually need to go to the configuration section of your site to get to those configuration settings. And what you will find many times is on the configuration page, there will be a certain amount of text that the module maintainer has written to give an explanation of how the module works. Now, not every module has a configuration page. And so other places that you can look when you want to figure out how to start using that module is you might find it under structure, for instance, like this is the case with the field collection module, that you actually go in through the structure interface so that you can start defining some of your field collections. So those three places should give you a good idea. You should find something in one of those three places, that either on the modules listing page, you'll see a link that takes you to the configuration page. If not there, if you just go to Drupal's configuration page, you may find it in one of those groups on the page. And if not there, you may find something on the structure page. Now, one thing that you may need to check into is whether this module has defined any permissions that you need to set in order to be able to do anything with it. So you may also want to have a look at the people permissions interface to make sure that anything that you're expecting to be able to do, you have been enabled to do. That's, of course, assuming that you've been granted the privileges to get to the permissions page. If you don't have that kind of access to your site, well, then you may also not have access to the configuration page or the structure page. And so if you've got somebody else who's administering the site for you, you may need to ask them to grant you those permissions, or you may need to go to them and ask them to give you a bit of guidance on how you are supposed to use the module. So moving along from there, many modules, although not all, will provide help text. So if you go into Drupal's help interface, and then you look through that interface, you may find a link for that module. And then the help page is designed to help you understand how you get started using the module. Some modules have taken advantage. I think this is something that Merlin of Chaos had put together. Earl Miles was this advanced help interface. And if you've installed the advanced help module, you may find that the module you're using does have advanced help defined. And actually, like for instance, CTools does give advanced help, and it's pretty comprehensive advanced help. They give some good examples of things that you can do and how you go about doing them. So check out the help text and see if that is able to get you moving in the right direction with the things that you want to do. Another form of documentation that you may find, and often if it's available, you will find it when you're on the project page. You'll find it in the sidebar, generally under the documentation area, is a link to a handbook, a section of the handbook, page of the handbook. And so, for instance, if you're looking at something like the Omega base theme, they have put pretty good amount of resources into developing the handbook on Drupal.org to teach you how to use Omega's base theme. And there are some contributed modules. I think like the rules module probably has a decent amount of documentation in the handbook. And in the case of the field collection module, it does also have a section of the handbook where you could do some research to understand how to go about using the field collection module. Now, in my situation, it wasn't a matter that I didn't understand what the field collection module did. I didn't understand how to configure it, how to go about using it. I'm quite familiar with it, using it from a site builder's perspective. What I needed to do, though, was to be able to do a bit of programmatic modification of information that was stored in a field collection. And specifically, what I was looking to do was that there were some fields that were set in the field collection, and I'm also using the field permissions module on the site, and I had the field permissions set in such a way that these fields were basically, you could consider that they were hidden fields in the field collection that I didn't want users being able to maintain. And specifically what's going on is I created an interface where people are able to have discussion around a particular node on the site. And what we wanted was, as it turns out, I put it all into one field, that there's the, call it maybe like a byline, but the attribution of that discussion post that was created there. And so I just wanted to programmatically fill in who the author of that post was and the date and time that they made that comment around this node. Now, we didn't want to use the core comment interface, and that's going to get us off maybe on too much of a tangent for me to go into, well, why not? Just accept the answer, just because we didn't, the comments module was not a good option for us in this situation. So we created a field collection, and one of the fields in the field collection is just a simple text area where people put their notes on this node. And then there's this hidden field that they don't have access to, but when they add their comment in this discussion thread, I want to then programmatically fill in the attribution or byline field. And so I suspected that there had to be some type of hook that would be available to my custom module. Now, I know there's hook node pre-save, but I didn't really want to have to then dig through how I was going to change a particular value in the field collection and what strange things might happen with that. And so what I knew I could look for is, if I went into the, I had to have access to the code of the module, and whether you have access to the server or not, you can still get access to the code of the module just by downloading the zip file or the tarball and putting it onto your computer. Or you could even go through the commits, and you could go into the the repository that Drupal maintains, and you can navigate your way through there to get to the tree, and then you can drill down through the tree to get to the place in the directory structure where you will find this api.php file. But before I get to that, I guess it would be worthwhile mentioning one last bit of documentation that could be useful to a non-technical person, because you may find that you need to go this route. You've tried other things and you haven't had much success. And modules that have been maintained properly, that are written well, will have a README file. And very often you can find things in the README file that can be helpful for you to get going. Many times the README file will be very similar, if not exactly the same thing as you find on the project page. So you won't necessarily find anything different in there, but it's worthwhile to have a look at it if you've exhausted other options and you still don't have the answer to your question. Check out the README file. So in my situation, I wanted to get to this .api.php file that, again, a module that's written well, that's got a maintainer that's following the Drupal best practices, will create this file. And so it's named with the module name. So in my situation, it's named field collection.api.php. And when I open that file, it's just a simple text file. And in that file, so for instance, there's the doc block that's at the top that says contains API documentation and examples for the field collection module. And then you can read through this text file to get an idea of what types of things are available to you. And as I scrolled through the file, I found that, in fact, there was the hook field collection item insert. The information in the doc block header there told me responds when a field collection item is inserted, and then right below that it says this hook is invoked after the field collection item is inserted into the database. Well, that wasn't going to do what I needed it to do, because I wanted to be able to change the information in one of those fields in that field collection before it was put into the database. I didn't want to respond to it and then do something, for instance, like the example that they gave there, they were showing a DB insert statement that maybe you would be inserting something into your own custom table based on something that happened in the field there. But I didn't want to wait until after it had already been inserted. I wanted to modify it before it was inserted. Well, fortunately, right below that, there's the hook field collection item pre-save. And the doc block for that says acts on a field collection item being inserted or updated. Well, this is a good thing. That means that I will catch both parts of the way that a user might be interacting with this particular node, that they may be updating that node. They may be adding a new discussion point on it. And so this also has a note that says this hook is invoked before the field collection item is saved to the database. So that was exactly what I needed in my situation, because that gave me the opportunity to then fill in this field. Now, in my situation, I needed to make a check first of a few things. One of the things was that this byline field hadn't already been filled in, because when a person saves a node, in fact, for however many, in my situation, this is a multi-instance field that's been attached to the node, and each field is a field collection. And so when the node is being saved, this hook gets called once for each of those instances of the field collection. And so I didn't want to continue to update that byline every time somebody was updating the node, because then we would mess up the attribution on the record. So I had to have some checks in my hook that I put into my custom module, but nonetheless, that was the hook that I needed. Now, actually, if I could have had my preferences, I don't really need to know when the field collection was being updated so much. I would have been happy to just deal with it when it was being inserted. But there wasn't a hook that fired in that way, and so I made use of the hook that I had, and it gets the job done quite simply. And in fact, going through the field collection hook does simplify things significantly for me in terms of the way that I set the information on that field. So that's how I went about solving my problem, was having a look for the module name.api.php file inside of that module's directory structure. Now, you may find sometimes that even that doesn't get you to where you need to be. And so as a last resort, there is always the option to start reading through the code in the module. Now, some of you may say, well, you're really getting deep into the weeds here now. It was bad enough to have to go into this api.php to be able to do something in your own custom module. I'm not a coder. I'm not going to be doing that. So I don't care about the api.php. I'm not going to use that. And I'm certainly not all that interested in reading through the code. But you don't necessarily need to be unwilling to have a look at the code, because whether or not you understand the code itself, you may find that these things that I'm calling the doc blocks, it's just comments, it's a way that we comment the code, have a sufficient amount of information that points you in the direction that you need to go. So I've taken you pretty much from one end of the spectrum to the other, and that should give you a pretty good sense of how you can go about learning how to use a module. So I hope you found that helpful, and if you had any questions or comments that you would like to share when this replay is available, I will make sure that I I will load it on teachyourselfdrupal.org. You will find it under the videos section there, and you may feel free to leave your comments and let me know what you think. So that wraps it up for today's Drupal chat. Again, I hope you found it helpful, and I'm open to any suggestions that people have for other chats that they'd like to see me do in the future. So until then, ta-ta for now.